Welcome back to my channel. My name is Peter Kay. So this is a video that is a long time coming. I've wanted to record a video like this talking about spiritual abuse and church hurt, as I think there's a lot of rhetoric around it, especially within the Christian community. And I think having been someone who has been in an environment where spiritual abuse, church hurt, I want to talk a little bit about this, was normalized. I really want to talk about it, and I feel like now is the right time. So this video is a long time coming, but why now? I think firstly, before ever talking on this topic, I had to go on my own journey, and I'm still on my journey. Someone who was in a spiritually abusive environment for about 10 years. I am somewhat of an expert on this, an unofficial expert, having experienced it and having had my own moments of really wondering, like, why did I stay in that environment for so long? God, why did you allow me to go to somewhere like that? Having so many questions and not having directly experienced abuse myself, I actually, have I not? Do you know what? We're gonna get into it. But anyways, the point is, I wanted to record this for a while, but I feel like now is the right time. I'm in a place where this video is not a reactive video. I'm not experiencing any hurt, but I think it's very necessary to have this conversation. And I'm going to share some of my reasons as to why I left the spiritually abusive environment that I was in and what led me to that decision. So if you are someone that's watching this that knows me, that I don't know if I'll mention the church or not, because I think it's irrelevant to this video. My main aim. So I've got some points because I know this is going to be a long video and I really want to keep it as succinct as possible. And this video is for anyone who has experienced spiritual abuse or church hurt themselves, or for someone that you're a Christian and you're just interested in it, or you're not seeing it spoken about in your church or in your local community and you want to get a perspective on it. Or even if you're someone who you're in a church where spiritual abuse, church hurt is the norm, and you're kind of like, what do I do about it? Or you're just curious and you've clicked because you want to see, oh, what's PK going to talk about? If you're someone that knows me personally. But my hope, honestly, is that watching this video today will give you a different perspective. It will get you to think and consider. And I hope that something I share will enlighten you. If you've experienced this yourself, I pray that this video will provide you some hope, some healing, some community, because maybe you're going through this in isolation, or you've not been able to articulate your thoughts or your feelings to anyone that you know because they won't understand, or you've isolated yourself from your friends and family so you kind of have no one to talk to. So I hope that in some way, whether you're experiencing abuse or you've never experienced it, or you're just like, I want to see what this video is about, welcome. Sit down. I've got my water here. As I said, I've got some points, so you'll see me refer backwards and forwards. Honestly, I don't know how I'm gonna feel talking about some of this. It's the first time I've recorded a video or I've spoken directly along this topic. You know, I've spoken indirectly about it on my podcast, but I've never directly said spiritual abuse or I was in a spiritually abusive environment for 10 years. And when I think about it, that's insane. I also know that because this video is gonna be a good one, I know there's gonna be distractions, it's gonna be loud. So if there's any disturbances, just be patient with me, okay? I'm gonna record it regardless because I know that now is the time and I can't just not do anything. Anyways, so to start off, I've got some key points. I want to give you a summary of what I'm going to discuss. I don't know if I'll do timestamps. I'm getting used to YouTube, so be patient with me. And if you're not already subscribed, subscribe. So I'm going to go through firstly talking about the definition of spiritual abuse, because I think it's important to define it just on the facts, not opinion. And then I'm going to go into like an overview of what that means. I'm then going to share with you my personal definition of what I would consider as church hurt, because I've seen spiritual abuse and church hurt, the terms being used interchangeably. And one thing I want to emphasize through this video is that they're not the same thing. You may have experienced church hurt and it might not be abuse, but we're going to get into that later on. And I then want to talk about my experience in the church environment that I was in previously. I'm no longer in that environment anymore, thank God. Then want to go through key characteristics of spiritual abuse so that you can be equipped and you can be wise in and sound in being able to identify this, because sadly a lot of people are in these environments, and because you've been through so many that are similar, you don't even realize what you're in. And then I'll talk about my lessons learned about spiritual abuse and being in a spiritually abusive environment. And then I want to talk about actions and my thoughts and recommendations to churches, church leaders, to Christians and the body of Christ in general. So yeah, here I am just sharing my thoughts. This video isn't to attack anyone. It isn't even to put blame on anyone, because I think spiritual abuse can happen in any church. It could even happen in a healthy church. Just like any other form of abuse, it can happen anywhere, anytime, by even unexpected people. And I think there are safeguards, there are things that we can put in place to prevent these things, to reduce the chances of them happening. But equally, the most important part, I think prevention is obviously really important, but also how you respond to abuse in your church is really what matters most. The abuse itself is, of course, it's devastating, especially to the people involved, but how you respond to abuse, honestly, I think that's the most important part. And sadly, a lot of churches are not responding well to abuse. They're pretending it's not there. They're just labeling it as church hurt. They're not taking accountability, and they're not being good stewards. They're not being what God has appointed them to be. But anyways, let's get into the definition first, and then I'm going to go through. Let's get into it. So definition, I'm a girl, I like definitions. I like to understand what something means before I'm going to talk about it. So spiritual abuse, this is just like an AI overview of it. So it's taken lots of different definitions, and the way that it articulated it, I'm like, this is great. I'm going to start the video off by reading this. So AI overview, shout out to you AI. Is, so spiritual abuse is using faith, shame, or harm someone, often within a coercive pattern that undermines their self-worth and autonomy, using scripture, divine authority, or community pressure to justify controlling behaviors like isolation, financial exploitation, personal experience with that one, or preventing critical thinking. And I thought this really just encapsulates what spiritual abuse is, because a lot of the times it happens together. And also spiritual abuse, a key thing to really highlight is that it is a form of psychological abuse. It targets a person's deepest identity, twisting what should be a source of comfort into a tool of power, and can occur in any faith or non-religious spiritual context. So as I said, it is a form of psychological abuse. You'll find that psychological abuse happens a lot in different organizations, not necessarily just in churches. It happens in other faith contexts and institutions as well. Even sometimes in some workplaces or in niche groups, a gym group, accountability group, wherever there are people involved in some sort of community, psychological abuse is often a type of abuse that you can find when there are hierarchies, leadership, different levels. And I think we just need to really be savvy about these things, not only to identify it, but also to be able to identify when we are also sometimes maybe even the perpetrators of psychological abuse. But I just thought I want to start off with that definition, because I know some people watching this video, you may have been coming because you want to get some tea, or you want to know what I'm going to talk about. But honestly, this video is not to shame anyone. It's not to talk just specifically about one church. Having been someone that's experienced this and speaking to other people and researching it and seeing what people are going through, I've realized that this is not just a one church problem. This is something that is happening a lot. I wouldn't say in every church, but it's happening a lot, and there's something that needs to change fundamentally. And change only comes when, we get together and we work together to change it. So I thought, let's start off with the definition. And now what I want to get into is talking a little bit about my own experience, and then I'll go through some other bits. So let's get into my experience. So I started attending a church when I was 16 years old. It was a Pentecostal church. I initially started going because my friend had invited me to the youth group. And at that point in my life, I was 16 at the time, and I've always grown up going to church. So I've been in many churches throughout my life. I've always gone to church. Being a Christian is is something that I was socialized into, but also when I got to the age of about 10 or 11, it's a conscious decision that I made that I wanted to be a Christian. You know, I got baptized at 11, I gave my life to God, you know, then I had my little period where I kind of veered off, you know, as you do, wanting to experience life myself, questioning a lot of things, experiencing bouts of depression, identity crisis, having my own little secret life that my mom never knew about. And then getting to the age of 16 and like, do you know what? I really want to take my relationship with God serious. Long story short, started going to this church as my friend had invited me to the youth group. And I started going, and I think one of the main things that really attracted me to the church at the time was I was going to another church with my mom, but this church in particular, there was a lot of young people going there, and I just felt like, you know what, it would be nice to be surrounded by people my age, want to live a life for God essentially. So it was more that community and the fact there were so many people my age that attracted me there. It wasn't necessarily the services or the message or way things were articulated or anything like that. It was really just that community aspect and seeing that there were so many young people my age that seemed to be on fire for God. That attracted me, started going, and very quickly, because I was already at a stage where I wanted to commit my life to God, I wanted to go on that path. I remember when I turned 16, I actually made a prayer to God about that. So for me, it just seemed like everything was aligning. So I started going to the services. I think I started off just going to the youth group. I was still going to the church I was going with my mom. And then eventually I started going to that church solely. Now, couple of things that led me to that. This whole idea that you had to just be in one church, the idea of like mixing wines, going to more than one church was frowned upon. Would I say there were red flags? Probably, but we're not going to get into that into this video. Otherwise, we're going to be here all day. But I started going for the community. Within probably a short period of time, I was getting quite involved in a lot of different things. I was committed, going to all the services. I was going Sunday morning service, the youth group, going to church on a Wednesday, which was like the Bible study, but really that's for another video. Friday, which was for deliverance. I was going very often. I started getting, you know, positions within the youth group and so on. It then became, I had like a role within the church, and with that role came, you know, counseling people, praying for people, that sort of thing. I'm gonna fast forward a lot. Maybe I'll have a specific video on the experience some other time. Let me know if that's something you want to see. But I just kind of want to summarize in a nutshell. Being in that environment, there was a lot of things that I saw that were normalized. I saw pastors being rude, disrespectful to members, pastors advising members on financial decisions, on jobs, you know, on relationships. And when I say advice, it was beyond advice. Advice is, you know, helping someone to kind of explore their options, but directly telling people like, oh, no, you shouldn't marry this person, or advising people to sell their homes, to give money that they couldn't afford to give in efforts to gain blessings from God. So there was one thing within the church, which I'll focus on before I fast forward to 2021. When did I leave? 2021. Twice a year, they'd have this thing called the Campaign of Israel. And in that, essentially, the whole purpose was for you to build up an offering or a seed. Well, they didn't call it seed there, but I know in some churches, that's what you'd call it, that you'd sacrifice to God. So that could consist of giving your salary, selling your car, selling items to raise money, to build this sacrifice to God in order to gain a blessing, right? Love to know your thoughts on that for different types of Christians. And the whole, again, with this, when it was talked about, there were verses in the Bible that would be spoken about as to why this was a biblical principle and concept. But of course, now having more sound doctrine and understanding and maturing in my faith, I've come to realize that, yeah, this was not, as much as they may have cherry picked some verses to make this seem like, yes, this is foundational and it's biblical, it was not. And this is where the spiritual abuse aspects comes into it. Now, fast forward to 2020, and throughout the 10 years I've been going, I was going consistently. It's rain or sunshine, I've probably missed a few Sundays. I had to be real sick to not go to church. But when we got to 2020, lockdown, COVID, even before that actually, I think towards the end of 2019, I want to say, I got to a stage where, you know, I was speaking to like friends and people, but I'd speak to them about God, but I'd never want to invite them to the church because I had concerns about their well-being and how it might impact them negatively. And then for me, the lockdown and being at home and not being able to go to church for that time when you actually couldn't go to church, it really got me thinking. And I started to realize, one, I didn't miss the church, which is sad. I didn't miss most of the people. The environment was so toxic to where it's like, it got to a point where it's very much people would report you like, oh, so and so, I saw them doing this or that. It was really like this crabs in a bucket kind of mentality. And this sense of community, it wasn't really a healthy one. And it's quite sad when I think about a whole decade of my life and this was the environment, and just not being in it, having time to stop and think and really realize that, oh my gosh, like this is not a healthy environment. If I'm concerned about inviting friends to somewhere because I'm concerned of their well-being, I need to be concerned about my own well-being. And this is what got me thinking. I remember I would always have thoughts about, this is not right. But I'd justify it and I'd say, oh, but we do good things. We're trying to help people. A couple of key realizations that made me realize that, yeah, this place is not healthy was, one, finding out that the bishop of the church owned a bank. And I remember when someone told me that, I was like, oh, a bank? That's not true. And for me, the shock was more in the sense of, in the church, they would often criticize other churches for pastors having businesses and so on. And then for me to come to the realization that the bishop owned a whole bank. If you know anything about the banking industry or the level of wealth or assets you need to be able to show to own a bank, this would blow your mind also. And just remembering what's been said and seeing the hypocrisy in this, and seeing also the reality that there are members of the church have gotten themselves into debt. Credit is ruined because of financial decisions they've made, giving above their means because they felt coerced to do so. Whether people want to admit that or not, it is what it is. The facts, the numbers don't lie. And seeing that just made me start to question, like, wow, the hypocrisy is astounding. And then there was just other things that kept happening, seeing lies, seeing the same rhetoric constantly being spoken. Oh, you may have noticed that people are leaving the church, but the problem is not the church, it's people. And what I'm saying to you right now is verbatim. I heard these in a meetings we'd have with the leaders, and just hearing that and really thinking, how can that make sense? In any workplace or organization, if people are constantly leaving, you're going to look at why are they leaving. You're going to have an exit interview. You're going to try to understand. You're not always going to say that the reason everyone's leaving is because there's something wrong with them. You're actually going to look at the organization itself. Why are people leaving? You're going to try to understand. You're not going to just blame everything and say, oh yes, the people, that's the problem. No, but why is it different in the church? This is some of the thoughts that I'm starting to have. And then it accelerated now. We've moved forward. There was one verse in the Bible I read. I'll get it up when we're editing. In the last days, some of you will say, oh, but we casted out demons in your name. We healed the sick. We did all these things. And then Jesus will turn and say to you, I never knew you. I remember reading that verse and thinking about my church, because all the excuses that I would make in my mind as to why I should still stay, or as to why, oh no, we do try to help people. That verse in itself made me reconsider. And I thought, you know what? It's true. It's not about the works. Can I say they evangelize? They do. Although I'd probably question what people are being evangelized into, but that's for another video. But one thing that I can say, it really made me question and stop looking at the works. Yes, we are in church all the time. Monday to Sunday, they're open. They don't close. Open 365 days. That's one of the boasts, right? He's going to say, I never knew you. For me, those words was just so sobering, and it was so clear. And at that stage, I knew I need to leave, because of the other realization for me was, this is not the environment where you just like, okay, let me talk to the pastor. We've come to realize they don't know what's happening. They are well aware of what is happening. And I'd heard so many conversations, bishops that were in charge at the time say the same thing that I just repeated. Oh, you might have noticed loads of people are leaving, but the problem is not them, it's the people. They're in sin, all these things. And before I left, I more or less had a little exit interview. Maybe I'll record a separate video. Yeah, let me know in the comments all the things that you want me to talk about. But essentially, explain to the pastor my reasons for leaving, and explain, no one's directly hurt me, but in essence, I can't stay in an environment where this is happening. I know it's happening. People are being abused. People are being hurt, and there is no accountability. All the blame is on the people. I can't stay knowingly that this is happening and nothing is changing. The bishops, the pastors, they are well aware of what's happening. I can't turn a blind eye. Now that I've had this revelation, now that it's become so clear to me that the environment that I'm in is unhealthy, and it's not the case of, oh, it's unhealthy, but the leadership want to get together, we want to change things. That is not the environment. The environment is either put up or shut up, in essence. And I realized I need to get out because I can't stay. I don't want to hear God say to me, I never knew you. What, for the sake of a uniform? For the sake of, oh, I've been here for 10 years? So I left. And here goes the journey. So I left. I didn't have another church at the time. Spoke to my husband about it. I was watching church services online, and I just thought, God will guide me. I'll figure it out. But I'm going to fast forward a little bit because I don't know how long this video is. I even need to go to the cinema and I'm running late. So I don't know what the quality of this video is going to be like, but I'm going to record it anyway. This is 4 years in the making. But after leaving, there's so many realizations, difficulties, challenges. It was really like a grieving process. And even the funny thing with leaving, imagine being in an environment for 10 years, having relationships, family, and then said family, a lot of people didn't speak to me after I left, unfollowed me on social media, didn't talk to me, relationships collapsed. Thankfully, I wouldn't say there was any relationship that really was like, oh my gosh, this is detrimental. My close friends, still my close friends, even though they were still going at the time. But even for me, as someone who had left, it was difficult at some points to still remain friends, knowing they were still going. And my prayer was like, God, honestly, open their eyes for them to see, because it's crazy. Like, it's just not healthy. If to get into all the things I experienced and saw would be a whole series, but I just want to give a brief synopsis so you can kind of understand. But for me, I came to that point where essentially I realized, like, I can't stay in this environment where this abuse, this wasn't church hurt, people have been spiritually abused, financially exploited, and I'm gonna stay because I'm not being harmed, and then I call myself a Christian. I can't do that. So I could not, my conscience would not allow me to stay, and so I left. But anyways, years later, I really prayed, not years later, months later, throughout the journey after leaving, I really prayed, God guide me to the right church. And I visited a few churches, and I started going to a church that I had a friend that she was going to that was also in the same church previously. And it was really a journey of healing. It's still a journey of healing. It's still a journey of learning, unlearning. And I'm grateful for the fact that I left, but I kept my faith. I'm grateful for the fact that I left and I kept my sanity, because when you really realize, and when I ponder back and I remember some of the things I experienced, I saw, and I really realized the depth of the psychological abuse that happened, yeah, that does something to you. It really does something to you. And I even think about other people throughout the years that have left and remembering things that they experienced, and even feeling guilty that, I was there, I didn't do anything. But many points of that, I was a child. I started going at 16. I left at 20, 26, 20, 25, 26. So there's also that survivor's guilt as well. Like, thank God I was all right. I still had my life together. But many people, that wasn't the case. Key characteristics of spiritual abuse. So if you're in a church and you're not sure, or you're looking for a new church, you want to reconnect with God, and you're like, what am I meant to be looking out for, PK? Here's some key characteristics of spiritual abuse. And one thing I want to emphasize is that no church is perfect. And I don't want us to use that as a guise for spiritual abuse. Yes, we know no church is perfect. That's common sense. Nowhere is perfect. Wherever there's people, there will be problems. But the key thing is, how are we dealing with abuse when it happens? Are we trying to prevent it? Are we trying to safeguard people? Churches often have very vulnerable people in it. Are we trying to safeguard these people? Or are we exploiting them? Is what you need to ask your leadership. Is what you need to observe and see. Not just ask questions, but what can you see? What is happening? Is it an environment where you can openly ask questions? Or is everything hidden? You need several appointments to be able to speak to someone in the leadership. One is coercive and control. Coercive and control is the norm. Secondly, manipulation and guilt is used a lot to abuse. Now, when you're preaching the word of God, when you're preaching the Bible, there's certain things in there that will create guilt. Like if you're talking about sin and people are living in it, you're going to feel guilty. But there's a difference between spiritual abuse and really just speaking about the word of God from the standpoint of where it is, and speaking in a way to teach, to correct, to reproach. that is fine. That's not abuse. I want to emphasize that too. It becomes abusive when you're using it to manipulate. So you're trying to get people to do something where it's beyond, you're trying to remove their self-control, essentially. That's the best way that I can articulate. You're trying to remove their self-control. You're inserting your own personal opinions in there. And also you're taking the verses out of context. In churches that spiritual abuse is normalized, a lot of the time this happens. The Bible is taken out of context. It is used to cherry pick and to support whatever initiative, whatever thing it is that they're trying to sell or get you to do. Another thing, isolation. If you're in a church environment and where you are being advised, to cut your people off, don't talk to your family, don't let them know, they won't understand. Of course, there's wisdom in everything, but when you are being isolated, and what I want you to understand as well, spiritual abuse is like any other form of abuse. It's like domestic violence, but in a church setting. You're not necessarily being physically harmed, but the psychological aspect is there, in the sense where when you have an abusive partner, they might not want you to be around your friends because they want to keep you close. Abusive environments where there's a lot of control. Even in some, this is going to sound crazy. There's a point where the youth pastors weren't allowed to have phones. Yeah, you heard that correctly. Again, abuse. Why would they? And I remember hearing that thinking, that's insane. But again, did I leave? No, I didn't. I still stayed. But again, it was to prevent them from getting into sin. If you've got to remove someone's basic right to be able to have access to speak to their family or friends, or have even saying it sounds crazy. But let me know, do you think that sounds crazy, or do you think that sounds, is that normal? Yeah, of course not. And again, normal doesn't always mean healthy, so you gotta think about that too. Exploitation, heavy on that one. Silencing and doubt. I want to speak a little bit about this. I'm kind of whizzing through because of time, but silencing and doubt. When situations happen, are people able to come forward and speak about it? And when they do, how are those conversations dealt with? Are they just completely shut down? You're wrong. No, we're right. You're wrong. Or are we actually having conversations to try to understand, to try to have a resolve, to try to amend things for peace? Or are we just silencing people? Is it a case of, just don't speak about it? Just focus on God. Yeah, just focus on God. If people just focused on God but ignored what was happening, there'd still be slavery. Modern day slavery would still be happening. The slave trade would have never stopped. Using these rhetorics, if you compare it, I know that seems like a bit of a reach, but it's the same thing. When you see injustices happening and you're turning your eye to not look at it, you are also aiding the abuser. And it's the same thing. We all like to believe that when injustice happens, we'll do something about it. But the reality is, a lot of the times we won't do anything about it. If it's not hurting us, it's easy to shut, your eye, to make excuses, to not do anything. Because it's hard. It's hard to step up if you're the only one. But that's another thing too. Also, where doubt is spoken of, where you are taught to question every single thought that comes to your mind. Critical thinking, there's no room for that, right? And whenever it's doubts about the church, the institution, the pastor, it's the devil. Coercive control. Because that's not what the Bible tells us. It says we need to test the spirit, right? It says that we need to be wise as serpents. We need to think. Everyone has to work out their own salvation with fear and trembling. That verse I got from my mama. She would say it to me all the time whenever I want to go to church. But it's true. Every man has to work out their own salvation with fear and trembling. And what does that mean? That requires critical thinking. That requires for you to understand the Bible yourself, for you to research, for you to look at the context. Context is so important. And that's one thing that wasn't taught in that church I was in. Context was not in context. That don't matter. It was whatever the pastor preaches from the paper, whatever the bishop has directed as the word for everyone. But context is so key. And a lot of the times when a word is given, but there's no context behind it, or the context that's used is not actually biblically sound, that's where abuse happens. And also confusion and not sound teaching. But anyway, last thing, justifying abuse. And like I said at the beginning of this video, spiritual abuse can happen in any church, even a healthy church, even a church where it's biblically sound, the intentions are right, God is there. Abuse can happen there. No church is exempt from this. But key things and my call to actions. just little me sharing my opinion. Firstly, we need to prevent abuse. How can we prevent it? It starts in the systems, it starts in the structure. Building healthy boundaries, encouraging your members to have healthy boundaries. They should not be in church every day. That's not healthy. It's not. And sometimes someone's in church every day because they've got nothing to do. It's different if you're retired, you don't have any children, you've got nothing to do and you want to give your time. But someone that has a family, has a job, they're studying, that's not healthy. You need to have a balance. We live in this world, but we don't need to be of it. So healthy boundaries, encouraging your members also to have healthy boundaries. Sound doctrine needs to be present, because when it's not there, there is room for manipulation. There is room for exploitation. Transparency in leadership. And I think also, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with having leadership and hierarchy and structure. Even the Bible talks about bishops and deacons and all these things. And of course, it gives the requirements that some churches aren't necessarily using. But having transparency with how funds are used in the church. The church that I go to now, they have an annual meeting where they talk about the funds. They talk about where the money's gone. There's transparency. This is like, what? This is a thing? But it makes sense. I'm giving my tithes and my offerings. Why should it be hidden as to what that money is being spent on? There needs to be accountability. And another key factor with the accountability aspect is the pastor or the leadership, he needs to have someone he is accountable to besides the Lord Jesus Christ. A physical being, a physical person needs to have some level of accountability with someone. Because one thing I've realized, whenever you don't have that, it becomes a dictatorship. When that person has no one, they are the monopoly of power. There's nobody that they have to be accountable to. It again, we're human. Pride, we can all be a victim of pride. We can all fall into pride, no matter how humble you think you are, how spiritual you are, or how long you've been a Christian. Whether you want to or not, we can all fall victim to this. And not having accountability, not having transparency in leadership, again, often abuse can happen and keep repeating itself. And that leads me to the next point, which is proactivity and accountability. When abuse happens, how you respond as a leader, if you're a leader in a church or you're a member in a church and you know that this has happened, someone stopped coming and you know that something went down, if you just shut your eye, just pray for them. That's great, pray for them. They want your prayers, they want your emotional support, but what are you doing about it? Are you speaking to the people that can do something about it, the leaders about it? Is something actually happened, or has that person just been ostracized, ignored, left to their own devices? That's the other thing. How you respond when hurt happens really matters. And this is where the church is getting it wrong. This is where many churches get it wrong. You just leave it. You ostracize the person. Yes, they may leave and fall into sin, but don't use that as an excuse not to do anything about what's happened. Because then it's going to keep happening and it's going to be a cycle. It's going to be a cycle. And unfortunately, this often then leads to people leaving God, not just leaving the church, but also leaving God completely. And you can judge and say, but if they really had a relationship with God, then blah, we're human. And I think abuse in general will hurt, but spiritual abuse cuts really deep, sometimes even deeper than physical abuse. And I say this as someone who I've not personally experienced physical abuse, but I've heard people who have been victims of sexual abuse also speak about the fact that the spiritual abuse that they went through damaged and affected them more than the sexual or physical abuse they went through. That shows you how deep it can cut. And I think this is why how churches respond, how leaders respond, how you respond as a member of a church, leader of a church, we all have our part to play in the body of Christ. How you respond when abuse happens, it matters. And God will ask you. He will ask me, what did you do? And what am I going to say? I just, no. At the end of the day, if you're watching this video, you call yourself a Christian, you're going to have to give account for your life and what you did or didn't do. And this is why I'm making this video, because this is also my part in doing. I can't not speak up because it's uncomfortable or it might ruffle some feathers in my relationships. At the end of the day, I'm doing what I feel called to do. And if that ruffles some feathers, let those feathers be ruffled. But if I go by the example of my Lord Jesus, when he saw things happening that were wrong, what did he do? He overturned the tables. And I think in 2026, some tables need to be overturned, because this can't keep happening. We need to stop. We need to do something about this. And me recording this video, it's a small thing. It's just a video. I don't know who's going to watch it, But regardless, if you are experiencing this and you came to this video, you're here for a reason. And quick message for anyone that's been hurt, that's experiencing spiritual abuse: your experience is valid. If no one has ever told you that, or you even thought, oh, maybe I'm crazy, maybe it's me, it wasn't just you. You went through it. Probably what you went through was legit. But one thing I want to say to you, as much as it's painful, don't allow these people to rob you of a relationship with God. It will take time to heal. It will take time to rebuild. And even if that means not going to church for a couple of months, but maybe watching a church online until you feel comfortable, you feel safe again, or even being a part of a Bible study, or honestly, just working on rebuilding the community. I also went through this phase. I'm like, do you know what? Technically, you really don't need to go to church. And that ain't a lie. But the Bible does talk about not forsaking the gathering of the saints. Church is important because it's not the building, it's community. Community is what church is supposed to be. It's not the physical building. But if you can at least build a community, be part of a small group or a network of Christians that you can edify each other, sound doctrine is there, healthy boundaries is there, accountability is there, it's going to help you to grow in your journey with God, and also to be able to help others to grow in their journey also. If you've experienced it, you're not alone. If you have no one you can talk to, my DMs are open, my contact details are there. I'm happy to be your online buddy and friend as you navigate this journey as someone who's experienced it, and I'm still on my own journey too. Message to those in an environment where spiritual abuse is normalized. My challenge to you is ask yourself this question. Ask God this question. Pray about it. What do you want me to do about it, God? Should I stay? Is there someone I need to speak to? What's your thoughts on this? What should I do? Because a lot of the times we go to our comfort, and our comfort tells us, things will change, or we can make excuses for everything. We can easily justify whatever we want to justify. But I challenge you, go to God about this. Go to God about the environment you're in and whether He wants you to stay there. And also, what can we do about it? If it's a case of, you've spoken to the people you need to speak to, nothing's going to happen, there's no accountability, I challenge you, get out. Because you staying in that environment, you are also a part of the problem, and you are enabling abuse to continue to happen. And you will have to give account for that. I'm sorry, I'm just speaking the truth. You will. That's the reality of it. And if you're also evangelizing people and inviting people into an environment that you knowingly know people are abused in and nothing happens, you are part of the problem. I'm so sorry. I'm not here to shame anyone. I say this as someone who is a part of the problem too. But this is the reality. This is the sobering reality of it. And I think when you come to realize the bigger picture of that, it really makes you realize you've got to be radical, whatever that's going to look like for you. And lastly, if this video has inspired you, it's helped you, let me know in the comments. Share this video with a friend. Maybe you've got a friend that they experienced spiritual abuse or church hurt, or they've got reservations about returning to God, returning to church. Share this video with them. I pray that this video will be a message of hope, a message that shows you that, not all church environments are unhealthy. The church that I'm in now, it's not a perfect church, but one thing I love about it, healthy boundaries, accountability. If there's something wrong, the pastor will actually say, I was wrong. If he's sharing something that's his personal opinion, he'll be like, this is my opinion. And I think just seeing the healthy balance, it just makes me think, what was I doing in that place for 10 years? But anyways, for another video. If there's anything I've spoken about you want me to go into more depth in, let me know. Thank you for sticking with me, watching this video. If you're not subscribed to my channel, subscribe. This is a Pearls and Perils. So we're talking about the pearls and perils of life, the challenges, the hard lessons, the awkward conversations, the things that we don't really want to talk about. But and this was one of those things for me. This video has been a long time coming. I'm proud of myself for recording it. I hope that it's still recording, because imagine if it wasn't. But here we are. This is the reality. I won't even say this is my truth. This is the reality. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you've experienced anything similar, if there's anything around this topic you'd like me to explore more in another video. I did have to rush through because I've actually got cinema. I don't know what time it is. I'm going to be late, but this video was more important than the movie. Have a good rest of the week, and yeah, share your thoughts, share this video. Let's continue the conversation in the comments. If you are a church leader and you want to get a little small group together and you want me to come and talk to your people, or you want to have a conversation, you want to be proactive in building safeguards to protect your people, to build an environment that can be as healthy as possible, I'm happy to have a conversation, to suggest some things. Let's work together. Let's really build and empower the body of Christ. God bless you. I mean, I'm saying God bless you because this video is about faith and stuff, but yeah. Anyways, have a good rest of your week, and I'll see you in my next video.